And so I, with great enthusiasm, urge an aye vote.
Representative DeGraff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we're talking about publishing the law, lowercase law. But too much of this law is in violation of the law, the uppercase law, the natural law, the moral law. When this chamber enacts compiled statutes as positive law, we're not just dusting the shelves, we are nailing down the frame of the house we live in. If the frame is crooked, you don't paint it and call it good, you fix it. The laws that were passed last year are not good. You stop and straighten it. This bill asks us to ratify in one vote the year of policy that bends the frame away from our constitutional oath, that bends our frame, that bends us in a direction of the law. And it's interesting when you look around this room, what we see when you look at the law, when you look at the moral law is to be aligned with morality. True law, what these pillars are, is they are aligned with the natural law, the law of gravity. They are aligned with it. And so when we violate that, when we start taking our pillars and we put them on slants and we call them that our personal truth, it's weakness. It's weakness. And when our laws are not aligned with the moral law, when they're not aligned with the natural law, the physical manifestation of the moral law, then we have weakness. So I like this room in that the architects took so much effort and so much time and so much resources into reminding us that we are here for the truth. So with the Second Amendment, let's talk about the Second Amendment. Shall not be infringed. Shall not be infringed is not a suggestion. It is a limit, not on the citizens, it is a limit on this body. How many laws did we pass last year that limit the citizens of Colorado, that restrict their rights, that restrict their ability to exercise their rights?
Representative DeGraff, this bill is about enacting the laws into the current statutes. I
Yes,
don't
ma'am.
think it's an opportunity to debate the merit of each of those laws, rather the enactment of them as a whole.
You want me to go through every single one of those laws
I'm
from last
asking
year?
you specifically not to do that.
Because this is about enacting all of those laws. So what I'm doing is I'm addressing a few of the reasons why we should not be reading these laws into and then codifying them into our legislation. Now, we could get all of them. The majority of them were anti-constitutional, but I thought I would just go, for the sake of brevity, I would just do a few laws, unless you want me to do all of them.
I'd like you to speak about it in a general sense. If you want to highlight a few, I'll give you some leeway.
Well, we're talking in the general sense because we're talking about the Second Amendment, and which is a right under the Constitution. The Constitution of our state of Colorado demands that we cannot violate the rights of citizens that are defined in the Constitution of the United States. We cannot be in violation. So what we've codified here, what the sponsors are asking us to codify, is violations of our Constitution. And we have an oath to not violate that Constitution. So when we have that oath to not violate the Constitution, and then not only are we violating that right, not only are we violating that oath and that responsibility on an individual basis each and every time we vote, that we vote in this case, as you guys do, as a block against the Second Amendment and our ability to exercise our right to keep and bear arms for the sake of, as delineated by the laws of nature and nature's God, that would allow us to protect our lives and our property and our liberty. So when we violate those, what I'm telling my colleagues, since I know yours aren't listening, what I'm telling my colleagues is we should not be codifying this into law when the oath that we've taken has been violated by the laws that would be codified by this bill. So yeah, let's leave them in that brown book. Let's leave them in an inferior status, unless you want to go through and litigate each one of them again. When a law replaces a right with a license, it flips the order. When you have to ask the state if you can exercise your right to self-defense, that is a license. That is servitude to the state. That is servitude to the state. Now, that is something that we would expect, but it is something in violation of the Constitution, and that Constitution is to what we have taken an oath. Citizens must prove themselves worthy before exercising what the Constitution guarantees. That violates, this bill that's before us today violates that right by asking us to codify what was done last semester in the what's called the Gold Dome High School, or the Gold Dome cesspool, I think is more accurate. But the Constitution displays sweeping prohibitions on common semi-automatic firearms, rapid-fire accessories, and the law-abiding citizens' First and Second Amendment. This is backwards. The proper test is not, can we imagine a benefit, but does this comport with the fixed meaning of the constitutional guarantee, which is shall not be infringed. So just for the Second Amendment alone, you cannot adhere to your oath and vote for this bill, which is supporting the violation of the Second Amendment and the violation of the Constitution, which is anathema to your oath. If a policy only works by presuming guilt, it is not aligned, it is not compatible with the idea of liberty. So you're asking us, the sponsors are asking us, for the sake of making the trains run on time, which is not the function of this government. The function of this government is that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed. These restrictions, these laws, these constraints, these chains, these shackles that the majority party has shackled, that's tied onto, has weighted down the citizens of Colorado, with which they've enslaved the citizens of Colorado,
Representative
should
Graff.
not be codified into the Red Books. Next, the sanctity of life. What are these rights that we hold self-evident? Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Life. Life is the number one, because without life, the pursuit of happiness and liberty are meaningless. Yet the laws of this country, of this state, that we want to read into and vote on and put into the Red Book and say this is good, this lowercase law in violation of the law, the capital law, not only advocates for the murder of millions of preborn Coloradans, the mechanical dismemberment, the exsanguination, the suffering. Why use euphemisms? Why don't we just say what any means, any time, any method? Why don't we just say what that means? Exsanguination, mechanical dismemberment, suffocation. That's what that means. Of preborn citizens of Colorado. And not only that, but the laws have preferenced averting those births of preborn Coloradans to the tune of millions of dollars per year with absolutely no restrictions. And we want to codify that into law. I would say in terms of what's going on in Colorado, the beatings will continue until morality improves. However we disagree, everyone knows us that forcing Colorados to fund feticide compels the conscience.
Representative Graff, I've given a lot of leeway here. Again, this is a bill about the enactment of the statutes. Please keep your comments to that.
Ma'am, I'm speaking of why we should not be enacting these statutes. I'm not speaking of specific bills. I'm doing as you requested, in speaking in generalities. So we talked about the Second Amendment, and now we're really talking about the preamble of the Declaration of Independence, which is the foundation of our Constitution, which guarantees which requires that this body, the purpose of our government, to secure these rights, these self-evident, creator-endowed, certain rights, certain as in absolute and guaranteed, not a selection of, that those rights are protected, preserved, and promoted by the laws of this General Assembly. And this funding of feticide not only violates the conscience of the citizens of Colorado, it violates the right to life of the preborn citizens of Colorado. So therefore, I'm explaining why I cannot vote for keeping the trains on time.
And I think you have sufficiently explained that point.
The people's money is not a cudgel from whichever side momentarily holds power. And you can look at this in when Bastiat, it's a great read, talks about that, and just continually fighting between sides about and that's how we end up with billions of dollars. I mean, we're $1 billion behind, we're another $1 billion behind, we have $3.5 or $4 billion worth of certificates of participation trophies that we have, that is more debt that is held by the state. And we vote those laws into place. And this bill codifies that into the Red Books and says, we think it's okay. When the state orders public programs to underwrite feticide, it crosses the line. I cannot vote for this bill. I would encourage everybody to not vote for this bill. From allowing the conduct of demanding complicity. So when you look at it, and Bonhoeffer talked about that, intentional neutrality is active complicity. What we have done, we have codified into law the violation of personhood into this state. This state has codified into law the violation of personhood itself. Now, I'd ask you to go, now what are the definitions of personhood? Personhood can be any number of things. It's generally referred to as a human body with a soul. Now, one side recognizes that there's a soul, the other side doesn't. So that leaves, for one side, it's the human body with a soul. For the other side, it is just a human body. Either case, person remains just human. And so what we're talking about is the mechanical dismemberment, the exsanguination, the bleeding out, the suffocation of preborn humans. The oath I took requires me to protect the free exercise of conscience. And I cannot in good conscience vote for a bill that codifies the extinguishing of the life of preborn Coloradans or postborn Coloradans, because the spectrum slides very quickly. Parental rights, speech, and the contested terrain of gender forces citizens into a battle of conscience. Parents bear the first duty to love and raise their children. The state is not the senior partner in the family. Now, I recognize that is our side. Your side is that the state is the senior partner in the family. The state is the provider, and the state is the protector, and the state is the decider, is the arbiter. From unjust discrimination without criminalization, disagreement, or compelling speech. The laws that we want to codify today compel speech, compel conscience, and they restrict it. That is servitude to an ideology. These are the shackles that you've put on Coloradans, on their minds, on their bodies, on their liberties. Fiscal restraint and the consent of the governed. Last year, we ended up with billions of dollars of overage and absolutely no way out. And this year, instead of dealing with these overages, we're just going to double down and bring out more. And the way to solve a budget crisis is decrease spending, not more. The only thing that this body is going to do to solve it is more taxes, more debt, and more spending. And somehow, digging the hole deeper is supposed to get us out of the hole into which you've dug ourselves. You've dug ourselves. 1035 bundles this all together: firearm restrictions, taxpayer-funded feticide, speech policing tendencies, and fee-driven growth into a single enactment vote. Boom. We're going to put that all into play with this vote. Bring them one by one. Let's relitigate them. Let's talk about them again. Is this really what we want to shackle, that we want to tie? Is this red book the albatross that we want to tie around the neck of Colorado? You might say this is routine and we do it every year. Routine is no excuse for ratifying what violates the spirit of our charter, the violation of our oath. Routine is a rut. It's a grave with the ends dug out. We are in that grave. We are in that rut. The rut is continued spending. when parents must watch their words to avoid the process of penalty, when citizens must obtain licenses to keep what is already there, when the Treasury grows by mechanisms the people never approved, the checks are failing, and the balance is non-existent. All bypassed by the cleverness of clever worded politicians. Not statesmen, but clever wording by politicians. To support these pieces of code into our law, I say respectively bring them again. Let's talk about them. I can't vote for them in whole. I'll vote against this bill. I encourage everybody to do the same. Make your case on the merits. If you can persuade the people's representatives under the lights of debate in the cauldron of scrutiny, so be it. Don't ask us to bless the whole bundle at once. What happened last year, just like the year before, was a travesty of justice, was a travesty of the law, and codifying in the law is a millstone with which this state is sinking. We are not just decorating the shelves with red books. We are setting nails in the frame of our state. The frame must be true. It must be aligned. It must be aligned with the moral law, like these columns are aligned with the natural law. We need consent before revenue, speech before compulsion, the Constitution before convenience. Until our code reflects that order again, I cannot vote to reenact it as positive law. For these ethical and constitutional reasons, I recommend and request a no vote on HB 1035.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Brooks.
Chair, thank you. Lest we get to the point where we think that it's just one particular member of this caucus that does have some very impressive skills when it comes to being loquacious. I don't want anybody to think that it is just that representative that is opposed to this. I simply wanted to come up and, for a time, considerably of less length, because I do not share at that same level. I aspire, but I do not share at that same level that loquaciousness. I still find it very important to be on record to say this makes sense to oppose this. Our caucus, it makes sense to oppose this. There are so many bills. Goodness gracious, so many bills. And the vast majority we don't agree with, especially when it comes to, just off the top of my head, anything public safety, discarding embryos that have already been fertilized. It's just an absolute disregard for human life, an absolute disregard for the taxpayers' money, an absolute disregard for the direction in which this state is heading. To simply rubber stamp an act and say, yeah, I'm good with that, I can't do that either. It's not one voice, it's not one person, it's not just bloviating. It cuts to the core of what we feel like we're supposed to be here to do. And it cuts to the core of the fact that many of us feel we have crossed that line and that we are not acting in the best interest of Colorado. We are not acting in the best interest of the constituents that sent us here. We are acting rather in a mathematical support of policy only that so many of us just cannot abide. So I too rise in opposition, and I understand there are not going to be many of us that will rise in opposition to this. However, I don't know, if it causes just some little sense of self-reflection of what we're doing here, I believe it's worth it. I would ask for a no.
Representative Kelty.